Welcome everyone to the Lifestyle, Environment, Heritage and Resilience Committee. It's a pleasure to have our committee members here and also guests in Councillor Fowler and Councillor Gates. Great to have you with us. Whenever we convene this committee, we acknowledge and pay respects to the traditional Aboriginal people of the land on which we gather. We acknowledge their descendants. We also acknowledge the many Aboriginal people from other regions as well as Torres Strait and South Sea Islander people who now live in the local area and have made an important contribution to our community. I don't have any apologies today, although I have been notified by Councillor Marshall that he's got a commitment he's got to leave for, and he'll be leaving partway through the meeting. There are no leaves of absence, and we'll then move on to the confirmation of the minutes. Can I get a mover for the minutes of the last meeting? Councillor Marshall, seconded Councillor Curtis. All those in favour? Those minutes are carried. Thank you. Is there any conflict of interest declarations before we move into the business of the day? No? Awesome. So we have a start item. The forward schedule is starred. And I want to just ask, did anyone have any questions about the Reconstruction Authority Voluntary Home Buyback program, which has now reached completion? You have got questions? Great. And did anyone have any questions specifically about the Emergency Services update? Is everyone happy to star that? If it's basically just a report saying we're going to do more if we can find funding. Does anyone have a problem with that? Okay, so we're going to start that one. Bob, great to have you with us. Okay, we leave it unstarred. That's okay. That's all right. That's all good. So we'll just move the forward schedule. Can I get a mover for that item? Councillor Marshall and then Councillor Curtis again. All those in favour? The forward schedule is carried. Let's move on to the Reconstruction Authority Voluntary Buyback program. Did you want a presentation, Councillor Martin? Sure. All right, great. Mr. Ryan, thank you. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, we'll just jump straight into the presentation. We've now completed this program, and I think it's some really good news stories in there. So for the Resilient Home Fund, there was 4 programs, one of which the city was directly involved in. So there was the retrofit, the raising, the demolition or rebuild and relocate, and the home buyback, of which we entered into an agreement with. So over 2 rounds, we had 13 properties delivered under the voluntary home buyback, 11 in Tullabudgera, 2 in Luscombe, and that was a $26 million program. There was a choice to outsource the program or do it in-house, and what we felt is it was better delivered by the city, and we got some really good outcomes with that, particularly around the engagement with our residents. But what that effectively means, Chair, is 13 families that potentially will, or definitely won't flood again, that had flooding impacts in some cases twice in 18 months. So the timeline was the program commenced, and then we came onto that around the 2021 floods. The QRA, Queensland Reconstruction Authority, negotiated with eligible property acquisition. So the city was asked to provide flooding data to the Queensland Reconstruction Authority. The program allowed for anyone within the eligible local government areas to apply, and then that was then done through our risk assessment and through flooding data provided through our natural hazards section here at Council. The facilities property settlements occurred through a range of areas, and towards the end of the presentation I'll provide all of the city functions that were included. It was a really one city approach to this one. The property was then safety maintained until demolition. We undertook the demolition works. It's then gets rezoned property to open space, and then the rehabilitation back to the park space. So that's the collaboration across 20 business units across 5 city departments over the 18 months, and I just really want to highlight that effort. Everyone jumped on board with this program, delivered it in high consultation with our landowners, and in many cases we renegotiated settlement terms to ensure that they were comfortable in the transition to what the next chapter of their lives were going to be. Just some demonstration there of each of the business units that participated across, and From a sustainability and social impacts, many of the properties were on slabs, so we were limited in their ability to achieve some things, but certainly from a salvage and sustainability report, it was done from each demolition. We looked around charitable contributions through the contractor, through the procurement processes, through local clubs, charities, and in the case where we could relocate homes, we did that, obviously reducing the landfill waste and lowering the carbon footprint. So again, just some more images of the work that went on across the program, and then the restoration towards open spaces across each of those sites. And I'm happy to take any questions through you, Chair.
Councillor Martin.
Thanks, Chair. Just around the acquisitions, interested around the buyback and the flooding in the region, particularly Tallebudgera. So now that the homes have been removed, just interested in if there is a measurable flooding net positive impact, or if that is known at this point.
Yeah, thank you, and through you, Chair. Thank you for the question, Councillor Martin. What we know is that there's a positive flow impact around the flood, but as we get towards the end of the open space transition of these sites, we are actually looking and working with our hydrologists to actually make that assessment, and I'm happy to bring that back through to provide a committee report. It might be 3 or 6 months, but we're happy to provide that back.
Yeah, I'd be certainly keen to see that when that future report.
You want to keep going?
Yeah, with 2 other questions, Chair. And so now the sites that have been cleared, just interested in, I've noticed in the report, the maintenance has now been absorbed into our costs. But just for the residents there, what's the expectation, I guess, of the standard of service? Is it a mode, field like a park, or is it more of a natural area?
Yeah, so the intention is to go towards parkland, and I think there's some amounts in the report that talk to the maintenance. Once the program goes full to open space, council can reconsider usage for those spaces within the deems of the program in relation to no habitable structures to be constructed, etc. But the initial program was for us to get it to open space, and then council can reconsider future land use should they wish to.
Okay, thank you. And just to follow on, Chair, and so that future consideration, could that be, whether that's, say, koala trees or something else, at what point would we likely to be considering those future uses? Yeah,
through you, Chair. We expect that transition to the open space to be completed within the next couple of months, and then that's something that certainly as the asset custodians, I could bring that back to council and consider for future, just taking on the conditions that the QRA have around that non-habitable structure.
So we're going to go to Councillor Gates in a second, but maybe if you're comfortable ultimately moving it, we might have a 2, something like that a further report be provided by February 2026 discussing usage and flood management on the newly acquired open space sites. Is that going to give you what you want? It sounds like you want us to come back with some more information about how those open space sites might be used in the future.
Yes.
And whether they can have a positive flood management impact.
Yes.
Does that sound right to you?
Yeah. Yep.
So so just the first one is just 1. So that council is just 1, and then 2. That a further report be provided by February 2026. Probably provided to council by 2026, or is it committee or council? What do you reckon?
Committee.
Okay. This committee. Committee by 2026, February 2026. Discussing usage and flood management on the newly acquired open space sites.
Yep.
Now, we're not debating it or anything yet, but I'm just getting a picture of that's nominally what you're kind of seeking in your questions.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah. And Mr. Ryan, is that achievable?
Yeah, absolutely.
Councillor Gates, your questions.
Thank you. I recognise this didn't impact council's budget, but do we know how the values of the properties were established, and was there compensation over and above the property value applied, given $26 million? A lot of dough.
Yep. Thank you, and through you, Chair. The Queensland Reconstruction Authority managed that process, so the landowners were provided a pre and a post-flood valuation, and they get to choose. They also got to challenge that, so if they weren't happy with the valuation, they could get a third-party valuation. So those negotiations happen directly between landowners and the state, so I probably can't talk to the details, unfortunately, Councillor Gates.
Any other questions? Councillor Fowler.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. Just given the voluntary home buyback program's now complete, and I know it was in relation to the 21-22 flood events, is there any schemes that are future for severe weather events beyond the 21-22, or is the city advocating for any of those?
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Councillor Fowler, this question's been asked of the Queensland Reconstruction Authority twice in public forums I've been at recently, and they both indicated that at this stage there is no extension of the program, that it was an event-based initiative, but that would be, obviously, at given the federal and state government funded this program, that would have to be a policy position for them. But at this stage, they have confirmed that there is no further planned.
Okay.
One follow-on, if that's okay, Chair. Has the city been contacted by residents, or are they aware of residents or properties across the city that could benefit from an extension of the scheme? Through you, Chair, Councillor Fowler, every resident that applied for the program through initially round 1 and round 2 were granted the option. There was a range of residents that then chose not to proceed, and some of the indications were that they'd resettle back into their communities and they were happy to accept that risk. So every property that applied in the round within the timeframes were made an offer. What we've also got is to go back to my first slide, the retrofit, and there's a range of properties. So they're dealing directly with the state, but there's a range of properties across the Gold Coast that also took that option up as well around retrofit or lifting.
All good. Councillor Martin, you comfortable moving what's on the screen? Yep. And may I have a seconder? Councillor Wilkinson, seconded. So moved, Councillor Martin, seconded, Councillor Wilkinson. Councillor Martin, do you want to open debate?
Thanks, Chair. Yes, apologies. I was just looking to speak to it, but we'll see if there's some debate. But what I'd say is, firstly, I'd acknowledge our state and federal partners through the QRA, but especially the work that city officers have done. We've seen how many departments have been involved and the way that it's been done through looking for community wins there, I think has been fantastic. And so I'd commend the officers on that. There's obviously going to be positive community benefits, which I look forward to seeing, what sort of net impact that is around flooding. But essentially, you can see there on the pictures that we've seen, some of those areas, were over 1.5 meters underwater. So it is a tricky area, but thanks to the state and feds for this opportunity, and that allows us to sort of either build back better or, in some cases, convert these areas and purchase out some of those owners. I'm particularly focused on this area of Tallabudgera that keeps getting hit, so look forward to seeing what future improvements and also this site, what future opportunities this will present for these blocks of land. Thank you.
Great. Didn't want to speak against it? No. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Thanks, Councillor Martin. Thanks, Mr. Ryan and team. It was a very, very strong debate, wasn't it? Yeah, it was. Our next presentation is the Emergency Services Safari Update, which was a series of events about engaging the emergency services teams, both at council and other places. Now, there is a presentation, but Councillor Doran, you had some questions. Do we want the presentation? No? You might be off the hook there, Mr. Ryan. Good morning, Councillor Hamill. Councillor Doran.
Thank you. It's just about the funding. So reading the report, the program was funded under state and federal grants. That money's been allocated and used, and there's a note in the report that says you'll seek funding in the 26-27 budget. Am I right there? 25-26, the next budget round. And in the interim, if I just understand, you're not seeking any further funding now. You're going to seek to try to find some funding within existing pots available to see whether or not another safari can be held within the non-disaster period in this financial year. Have I got that correct?
Through you, Chair, that's correct, Councillor. We're going to look at any other these funding opportunities come up throughout the year, and we'll try and see if we can explore one of those to deliver one within 25-26.
Okay, great. Cool. And one of the
before you move on, can I just clarify? What was the way I read it was these events were not council funded.
There was a small amount of council funds just for small miscellaneous items, but predominantly right through the state and Commonwealth funding packages relating to the Christmas 2023 event.
Yeah, great. Sorry, back to you, Councillor.
That was the first bit of the question that said it was state and federal funding.
Right.
Yeah. The follow-up question was, in the report, there's you outlined a resource, a 3-month resource and a price allocated to that. And I'm just curious, I'm going back to it now, is that only going to be allocated if you can find the funding within the existing budget to therefore put on the event, then you will then find the additional funding for that resource?
Yeah, through you, Chair, Councillor, that's to be correct. We wouldn't put a resource on if we can't deliver, and that's why also in the report our recommendation is that it would be delivered by the current community events team, which was our preferred model. But given their workload, and we had a very quick funding envelope this year to execute, we ended up putting a temporary resource on for 3 months to deliver it. But our preferred one would be to put it through the current existing FTE of community events.
Of course.
What are the chances that you'll find the funds to hold one of the events this year?
Yeah, so through you, Chair, at the time of writing this report, the Category C and D measures for TC Alfred hadn't been announced. We've seen a broad announcement last week. However, there's no detail. So the state's currently writing all the guidelines around that. So there might be an opportunity, but I couldn't confirm until we have the guidelines in place.
Is that enough? Are you happy to move the item, given there's no other questions? Is that all right? Yeah. Councillor Doran is moving the item. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Wilkinson. Did you want to make another further comment, Councillor Doran? All those in favour? That motion is carried. Thanks, Mr. Ryan. Appreciate you. I'm going to move a procedural motion that we deal with the general business item in open session first, so we don't go to close and then open again. So we might just get that one out of the way, and that also enables us to say goodbye to some officers who are here to answer any questions. There's a general business item. We'll just move a procedural motion that the general business item be dealt with prior to closed session reports. May I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Munn. All those in favour? All right. So we're going to move to the general business item that relates to the Critical Zone Observatory. I wonder if DJ and Andrew and Grant could join us in the chambers just to answer any questions. Councillor Gates.
Just a question first. Did you seek guidance about whether this is actually a general business item?
I did, yeah, I think it is. And I did talk to the Executive General Manager about it. It was provided in consultation with them. And the context around it was that the Springbrook groundwater investigation is an ongoing body of work that's being undertaken that was subject to a further report later this year anyway. And this correspondence from QUT, who is our partner in that Springbrook groundwater investigation, has written to us, and they've written to us quite formally. I've provided a copy of the letter. Yep. And it nominally expands some of the scope of what was being considered in the Springbrook groundwater investigation. And so as a result of that, I thought it was appropriate to let council know and bring it to committee. It's an environmental matter. It doesn't change the work that's going on with the Springbrook groundwater investigation, except to the extent that QUT has seen a much broader, context to it. But maybe if I can throw to Grant, he can provide some officer insight into that. Is that okay with you, Councillor Gates?
Yeah, sure.
Alex, Grant?
Thank you, Chair. Your permission.
You just need to press the button on your microphone.
Thank you, Chair. The Critical Zone Observatory was come up with to actually address some of the issues, the shortfalls that we were finding in understanding the system up there. When we started to look at groundwater, part of the groundwater brief was to understand the impact of changing groundwater levels on the ecosystem, because it's a World Heritage Area and forms part of our, important hinterland region, particularly being a biodiversity hotspot. So we, the team looked around at different ways of understanding complex ecosystems like that. And there's an international approach called a critical zone observatory, which has been developed in the United States and adopted around the world. So what it does is it looks from the bedrock, groundwater, soil layers up through the forest itself, the canopy, and even the near atmosphere. What it's capable of doing is understanding the trajectory of the system, including climate change impacts to the system, and the impacts on the biology over time. And it's something that we need to actually do for a long period of time in order to understand what's going on. So this kind of critical zone observatory is applied in high-value ecosystem places around the world. And in Australia, there are already 6 of these. None of them are in a World Heritage Area, and none of them are in a mountaintop ecosystem like this one. So Gondwana rainforest is particularly important in terms of its evolutionary history. It's the oldest type of forest on Earth. The first songbirds on Earth evolved there, and it's in our backyard. So it's part of the Gold Coast ecotourism drawcard. Lots of people come here, not just for the beaches, but also to visit those hinterland regions. So understanding the health of that system is important.
Yeah. So we'd be one of 6 in Australia.
One of 6 in Australia, and the first of its kind in a mountain in a Gondwana rainforest.
Okay. All right. It also, I mean, from my perspective, it also probably has some relevance to the body of work that's being undertaken with Eaglemont right now. So Eaglemont Estate is a large parcel of land that Council's purchased that's in the public domain. We're going through a bit of a master planning process and thinking about different usages of that site. A small section of this site might end up lending itself well to this, and I thought it was appropriate, given that other work, that this form part of the already expected Springbrook groundwater investigation report that is expected later this year. I'm happy to move the item, but if you have any other questions... Yeah, Councillor Gates, then Councillor Curtis, then Councillor Doran.
Yeah. Will this impact on existing resources to any extent?
Through you, Chair, no, there's no allocation of funding for this initiative, the CZO, for this financial year. In the work involved. Yeah, well, we already have our existing resources, including Grant, part of his position, and the work that's already been invested in. So no new resources to do this work and to bring the report to Council.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Curtis, then Councillor Doran.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question for our guest speaker. I was interested in the other locations of the other 5 and what types of ecosystems they are.
Certainly through the chair, Tasmania, in the forest ecosystems down there. Out in the desert, there are some. There's some in Western Australia. I actually can't recall the exact locations of these things, but nothing really in a rainforest ecosystem of this kind, nor on a mountaintop. So in the United States, they do have mountaintop critical zone observatories, and they're important because they show, like, at different altitudes what's going on in our atmosphere and what's happening to the ecosystems that are at those altitudes. So for us, we have a cloud forest up there, which is pretty unique for a subtropical climate. Normally they're in the tropics, and that cloud forest is subject to climate change impacts such as cloud lifting. So as the climate warms up, the clouds start to lift. And that ecosystem evolved in a time when conditions were much wetter. And so that cloud water moisture input, up to 40% of the moisture in that forest can come from clouds, is a really critical component. So part of the monitoring actually is cloud moisture capture. So they've 3D printed plastic devices that can capture the moisture out of the air. And they're hung at 3 different locations in that forest, and they'll start to tell the story of what's actually going on up there in that forest and how well it is handling the changes in climate.
So good. Just a follow-up question in relation to the work that follow-up question in relation to Councillor Gates's queries. Your work currently, Grant, through the Springbrook groundwater investigation project. To what extent has that been used in our work with discussing the water extraction on the mountain? We had a number of development applications come in for water extraction. Some of those have been refused by Council. How's the interplay between your work and those development applications play out?
Thank you, Chair. Through the Chair. The court case actually drew on a lot of the work that we undertook to understand the system up there. So we got a conceptual model of the mountain that allowed us to understand where the aquifers were and the risks, like some of the risks for drawdown.
Yes.
So the forest itself likely relies on that groundwater.
Yes.
And although we haven't been able to quantify the amount of water moving through that system over the last 5 years because of the amount of rainfall we've had. We've had 5 of the wettest years in history.
Yes.
So we haven't seen the system under stress, under really dry conditions. It hasn't really been a proper dry season to assess that impact. So what we were able to do, though, was highlight some of the risks, and that helped the court decide on the conditions. So, for instance, the link between certain threatened species up in that ecosystem that rely on like ample water coming from the groundwater seeps, we're able to help them identify those things, and then the court then made a decision about what the proponent was supposed to monitor.
Required to monitor.
Yeah.
I've got Councillor Doran and then Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chair. Just reading the letter that you provided this morning, it says just at the bottom of the first page, the request of the letter, as I understand it, says, I would be grateful if your office, directed to your Councillor Tozer, could reach out to the federal member, I'm not going to read the rest of it, and relevant state counterparts to advocate for investment and ongoing financial support for the initiative. So to me, as I read that, that's the request of the letter. So that, I mean, you could do that.
I could, but I think it's appropriate that we incorporate what is requested in the existing work that we're doing rather than me write a letter as chair without, talking to council about that.
And so my questions on the rest of the piece, I mean, I'm a little uncomfortable with this because it says asking for a report, Chair, but it's also introducing quite a complex new item that I think would be part of a quite detailed report typically. But the items, number D, says highlighting options relating to, we're now looking at options relating to Environment and Cultural Learning Centre in partnership with QIT, also detailing funding. So it's putting us on the hook for potential costs that for an item that I'm not sure that you've provided enough detail about what the benefit this is to the community. I feel like it's more than a GBI. I think it should just ask for a report about the item, and then with the item can come and detail what you want from us at that point. But I don't want to advance other items of it without really having a full detail of what the SGI and the OZ-CZO does for us. So
the report, it doesn't, what's proposed here doesn't allocate any funding whatsoever.
I know it doesn't, but it does take steps towards D, an Environment and Cultural Learning Centre in partnership with QUT that doesn't actually outline what that looks like.
Again, it's not meant to. In fact, QUT has been the advocate for that, and the only asset that I think is relevant to that is the Eaglemoor Estate,
exactly,
where we're already doing the master planning.
For nature-based tourism, and we haven't seen exactly, well, the city did, we haven't seen exactly what the master plan will look like, and the report could potentially be inserting a new use to that we haven't considered.
I suppose I'm just looking for options that could be considered as part of the Eaglemoor report. But yeah, like Eaglemoor's a fairly large site with lots of different uses on it. You've seen the master plan, obviously it's in confidential session, but it's not intended to preempt what might happen on that site. And what is proposed here, this Environmental and Cultural Learning Centre, is a proposal of QUT, not us. Definitely not imposing anything for us to investigate. There's options, but that's just an answer as far as where I'm at. But Councillor Wilkinson, you had a question.
Thank you, Chair. And I share a few of the sentiments that Councillor Doran has just mentioned. I just also, just out of curiosity, obviously looking at this letter now, and it is requesting, obviously, we engage with the Federal Minister. But have you, in your conversations, asked the question of QUT, have they tried to do this themselves? And if so, what's been the result thus far?
So the answer to your question is for the last 3 years. QUT has been working in partnership with Council on this groundwater investigation and joint funding. So we've provided funding and they've provided funding. We are at a point where they've said, according to this letter, they're not asking for funding from us. They're asking for funding from the state and federal government because of the substance that's been uncovered as part of the co-funded investment thus far.
Yep. No, sorry, Chair, I'll clarify. I wasn't talking about our engagement with QUT on this. I'm talking about QUT engaging directly with the Federal Minister in relation to this. Have they
The short answer is, yeah, that they're intending to make contact, but because the work that has been done so far has been done in partnership with us, they've politely written us a letter saying, let's do this together.
Okay.
And, as an educational institution, I'm assuming they engage with both the state and federal governments regularly in various advocacy activities, but this particular one is a product of a partnership that's been co-funded up till now and is also the subject of a report that is already expected later this year. Does that answer your question or not really?
Oh, it does to a degree, Chair. I feel like it's just one of those, again, you may not have had the conversation with QUT to ask the question directly. Have you talked with the federal government minister, like given he lives on his office is on the Gold Coast? I just don't know whether they've tried to approach them and they've had unsuccess, and therefore now they're saying, obviously we're collaborating. Can you also assist us in trying to, push this ahead? That's all.
Yeah, I think my understanding was I met with Dr. Lucy Reading and Grant and the team. They indicated that the work that had been done so far in the groundwater investigation, the Springbrook groundwater investigation project, was of significant academic substance. It had, frankly, global interest. They had engaged with the federal and state government to the extent that was probably reasonable and normal as part of their general advocacy, but this was a joint project which they were sharing with us, and so they've written to us saying, hey, let's do this together. And frankly, I thought it made sense. So
I appreciate that, Chair, and I appreciate your insight on it. Maybe it's not through yourself, but maybe to the team. We've been mentioning that there's a forthcoming report that somewhat captures elements of this, I would say.
Yeah.
Why would we not consider potentially looking or waiting until such a report is brought back in the first instance before going down more paths, perhaps, and some of the reservations perhaps Councillor Doran has shared? Would that be more timely as far as what's captured here that wouldn't be captured necessarily in that forthcoming report? No. I guess is probably more.
I can answer the question. There's nothing. Operationally, this letter could have been, because it wasn't just forwarded, whilst it was addressed to me, it was forwarded to officers as well. It could have just been done operationally and included in the next report. And out of courtesy and transparency, I asked that it be brought to committee because I thought it was relevant enough for councillors to be across. So all of the things that are here could have been included in that report anyway, and we would have never known the report would have come and we would have just read the report. I thought it was relevant enough to bring to committee as a GBI because it happened, there was a letter, they've asked for state advocacy, and I don't really want to wait 6 months for councillors to not be informed, and I've tried to do the right thing by bringing it up as a GBI because it's relevant. Councillor Doran, you had a question? Of course.
Just to step through the concerns I raised was you're far more briefed about this than I am, and it says here that Dr. Reading said, we're happy to provide you in the letter to you supporting materials, briefing notes, and facilitate discussions with our research team to support this request. And getting the information that I've got, I don't know implications, and that's where my concern lies. I don't know enough about it, and so I don't. If it was just we're going to bring a report outlining something and we're going to see a report in the future, I'd have less concerns. I can't, based on the general business item and the letter that was addressed to you, work out what implications there are, which is where my hesitation lies. Because if it had have gone to, for example, the team that's working directly with QT, then it would have been a body of work come through the people working directly with the operators, as you say, they're working together, and we probably have a different viewpoint because it'd be wrapped up with a more comprehensive report. And just based on the information I've got, which is a lot less detailed than what you've got, Councillor Tozer, it just doesn't, I haven't been able to assess where the risks might lie with this item.
So the short answer to your question, from my perspective, is that I'm not intending any implications or risks. I'm asking for a report to help us get that information that you're seeking that we probably would have got anyway, but I thought it was the right thing to do to be transparent about the conversations that I'd had. But again, ultimately there is already a council resolution to bring back the Springbrook groundwater investigation report. there's already a resolution to do that. So, yeah, I suppose the purpose of this GBI is just to keep councillors informed through the relevant committee that's related to environment. Councillor Hamill.
Mr. Chair, I just want to add that I think it's appropriate what you've done, because if there would have been a report come in the future and all of a sudden new information and letters from QUT are brought up, we then would have said, well, when did this all happen?
When did this all happen?
Earlier? So just to back you up, I actually think you've done exactly the right thing. We've received a letter with a request. The GBI calls for a report that was already coming, but we'll add this additional information in, and now everyone's aware of it at the earliest possible opportunity. I think it's how it's meant to work, and just to support that, I think it's the right move.
I appreciate that, Councillor Hamill. Councillor Martin.
Thanks, Chair. And please let me know if this is confidential. But just interested in the city arrangement. This request here is seeking funding over 5 years of federal.
From state and federal.
State and federal. Just interested in our arrangement with QUT. Is that a multi-year could you share question. What sort of funding commitment, if that's publicly available?
It is.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So yes, we've been in a multi-year collaborative agreement with the state government, QUT and Seqwater. So all of those parties have had some in-kind support up to this point to deliver the SGI. So the report that's forthcoming to council makes recommendations around ongoing collaboration to look at this critical zone observatory approach. And that's, I guess, where we're at the moment. So we need to consider whether or not there's an ongoing collaboration that the city would like to be party to.
Which we've already had for how many years?
Yes, since 2019.
And the relevance to council is, just so I've got it clear, as part of the water strategy, we are considering this particular area is where all the water falls out of the sky and then falls down the hill and then goes into the water catchment for the drinking water for the city. Does that sound right to you? That's right. Yeah, cool. That's why it's relevant to what we do. Cool. All right, I'm going to move the item in its current form. And do I have a second? Councillor Curtis, you have to second that? Councillor Wilkinson, you want to second it as well? No. I moved it. Councillor Curtis will second it. I'm actually really excited about this work, and I think Councillor Hamill raised a really good point. The reality is that had we got a report that involved QUT and these other elements later, the first question that councillors, I think, would have asked would be, when did this all happen and when did this evolve into something that was a partnership with QUT? And I feel like I have tried to do the right thing by being as transparent as I can about what's been written and what I think is the good work going on. It's not actually just about the work with QUT, though, and this future academic piece, keeping in mind that QUT is currently training the next generation of geologists and environmental scientists and hydrologists using assets in our city, which I think is really exciting. They're already using this site to help, some of the new generation of scientists, and that's pretty exciting. But it's also been a really good resource for us to have great information and assistance with some of the development applications we've faced for commercial activities in Springbrook, particularly commercial water extraction, and the work that we initially undertook, which actually the catalyst for that, I think, was a local area works funding maybe 4 years ago. We had a small allocation to start the program, and then it ended up becoming so relevant that the whole of City and SEQ Water and everyone kind of co-funded it. It has grown to something that's been a really great resource to us in assessing development applications as well, and that's been a really positive thing. Yeah, does anyone want to speak against it? Good. No? All those in favour? That motion is carried. Those against? Thank you, Councillor Troy. Do you want a name recorded? That motion is carried. Thank you, Grant. Appreciate your work. We now have got an item that is in closed session. And it's in closed session because it relates to negotiations about a commercial matter involving the local government for which a public discussion is likely to prejudice the interests of the local government. And I will move to closed. May I have a seconder? Councillor Martin. All those in favour of moving closed? That motion is carried. It was moved by me, seconded by Councillor Wilkinson. Yep. We are now in open session. For those watching, we have just had a fairly in-depth discussion about the future of the... Just double check what I can call this. Of the Nerang administration site. And what we discussed was the preferred future uses and discussing property services team's recommendations in relation to the future of that site. The recommendation speaks for itself, and it talks about some recommendations that are captured in the report as opposed to being part of the public recommendation. But what has been discussed is that a master plan will occur on a site. We've already acquired a site adjacent to the Nerang Administration Centre, which is in the public domain, and that site in its entirety needs to be master planned before the next steps can go ahead, and that's what we're doing. I'll be moving the item. May I have a seconder? Councillor Wilkinson. Did anyone want to speak against the motion or speak for the motion? No? All those in favour? That motion is carried. Is there any other general business or any other matters people want to raise today? I close the meeting at 10:28. Thank you.